From the footballgameplan.com, where football makes sense, I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Bring you a 2011 FCS conference preview on the Northeast Conference. We're going to take a look at this conference team by team, top to bottom. So let's start with the recruiting trail to see how well these teams recruited this past offseason. Best recruiting class in the Northeast Conference, I'm going with Monmouth. Monmouth had a small class, but a lot of impact players, guys on the at the wide receiver position, guys on the defensive front. But the guy that stands out the most is athlete Evan Ruane. 6'3", 215, can play receiver, can play in the secondary, can also play linebacker. This guy's going to be a true dual threat player for the Hawks and may see time as a true freshman. Some key recruits in the Northeast Conference. You look at Albany bringing in defensive lineman Corey Connell. This guy's going to bring a lot of pressure from the defensive end position, has a lot of speed and quickness, and should be a force on the defensive line. Bryant got a great quarterback in Brian Tesseroff. This guy, live arm, very accurate passer, and also is very mobile. Central Connecticut also got themselves a great quarterback in Brendan Cullen. This is a guy I really like, throws well on the run, very powerful arm, and should help out that Blue Devils offense. The Dukes of Duquesne got themselves a tenacious tackler in the secondary in Taiwan Frey, guy that has a lot of size for that safety position. You look at Robert Morris, bringing in Ryan Bounds. This guy played tailback in high school, so you know he has the quickness and shiftiness. It should help bolster that secondary. Sacred Heart got themselves a tremendous athlete. Tim Goodwin can play O-line, D-line, even some tight ends, so he brings a lot of versatility to the table. You look at Calvin Bain, defensive back, played wide receiver also in high school, so he has great hands. That should just help him out even more so as the defensive back at the collegiate level. Wagner got themselves a tremendous athlete. Anthony Emmanuel got to play running back, wide receiver, and he also brings a lot of speed to the field. Now here are some Northeast Conference superlatives, starting with the best quarterbacks. The Dukes of Duquesne have the best quarterbacks in the conference. You look at Sean Patterson, this guy, 20 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 55% of his passes, so he can improve in that aspect. But overall, a very solid player and is going to have the Dukes headed in the right direction. Best group of running backs, I'm going with the Albany Great Danes. You look at their trio of tailbacks and Andrew Smith, Dylan Romaine, and also Ben Masikis. These guys combined for over 1,500 yards. You look at that trio, that three-headed monster, and there's a reason why a lot of people like Albany to finish at the top of the conference, because they can grind it out on the ground. Best receiving core, I'm going with Robert Morris. The Colonials have a very talented tight end, All-American tight end in Chaudre King, over 500 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. But they have 2 starting wide receivers in Anthony Coleman and Jamie Cobb, both average over 15 yards a catch and are very explosive. And there's a reason why they expect quarterback Jeff Sinclair to take the next step. Best offensive line, I'm going with the Bryant Bulldogs. The Bulldogs boast one of the best front 5 in the conference. All 5 starters return, led by left tackle Cody Ogney and right tackle Chris Willison. These guys are solid bookends, but the depth behind them is outstanding. There's a reason why Jordan Brown should have another banner year. Best defensive line, I'm going with Central Connecticut State, and this is strictly from a pass rushing perspective because we know they struggle in stopping the run, but I think they're going to improve in that aspect. But you look at guys like Dominic Giampetro and also Charles Williams. I like the pass rushing ability, and there's a lot to like about a defensive line that can get pressure on the quarterback. Best linebacking core, you have to go with Albany. The Great Danes boast 2 talented linebackers in John Morgan and also Dave Plungus. These guys combined for over 130 tackles. Both guys are very aggressive and very instinctive, and that's what you want out that linebacker position. Best defensive backs, I'm going with the Bryant Bulldogs. They say 75% of the world is covered by water. The other 25% is covered by the Bryant Bulldogs secondary. They're led by 2 guys, Max Machado, 4 interceptions, and also Samai Waxab should be an all-conference player again this season. Best special teams in the conference, I'm going with the Albany Great Danes again. These guys boast some of the best specialists throughout the conference. Paul Layton is a guy that's an outstanding punter. Kicker Herb Glass is another guy that's very accurate. And 2 returners that catch my attention are Ryan Kirshner and also Dylan Romaine. Both are explosive out the return game. Offensive MVP, I'm going with Bryant's tailback, Jordan Brown. This guy at 5'9", 185, had over 1,400 yards last season, 15 touchdowns, 5.3 yards a carry. I love the way he's shifty in and out of the hole, and I love his breakaway threat. And this is a guy that also can catch the football out of the backfield. It's going to have a big year for the Bulldogs. Defensive MVP, I'm going with Duquesne safety Serge Koner. This guy is always around the football. 3 forced fumbles last season, 11.5 TFLs. And this is a guy that has 64 tackles, former linebacker, so you know he brings that physicality and linebacker's mentality to the safety position. Freshman of the year, I'm going with Duquesne's Defensive back Taiwan Frey. This guy brings that swagger that you want in the secondary. Physical tackler, 6'1", 205. A guy that has tremendous ball skills. But I think with his swagger and his confidence, that may get him on the field early. Best pro prospect, I'm going with Shardre King, tight end out of Robert Morris. This guy is 6'2", 225. Interesting matchup problems for opposing defenders, and he's probably going to see more H-back in the NFL, but he has sound receiving skills, and I think he's the best pro prospect overall out the Northeast Conference. Team on the rise, I'm going with the Monmouth Hawks. I would say this year is the rebuilding year for Monmouth, but these guys have a lot of talent, very deep roster, so with a lot of inexperienced guys getting some playing time this season, look for them to bounce back in the years to come. Toughest schedule in the Northeast Conference, I'm going with St. Francis. The Red Flash have a tough road slate. They open up the season at Wagner, tough place to play, in North Dakota State, one of the leaders in the Missouri Valley Conference. But you look at October, they have to travel to Robert Morris and Youngstown State. Very tough slate for a team that's going to look to have a rebuilding season. Prediction time in the Northeast Conference. At number 9, I'm going with St. Francis. Reasons for optimism, I like where they are. Offensively, Kyle Harbers is a very talented tailback. Quarterback John Kelly is going to improve on what he did last season, and there's a lot of depth at the wide receiver position. Causes for concern, I look at the front 7 of their defense. Can they get better up front to stop the run? And he gave up 39 points a game, 32 points a game. That has to improve. But what we will learn is that St. Francis, if they can improve just a little bit on defense, they are headed in the right direction. At number 8, I have Sacred Heart. Reasons for optimism, you have to love tight end Rich Ross. He has a bright future, 700 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns. I love the defensive depth. 7 starters returned off a defense that was improving, and the offensive line is very solid. Causes for concern, they lose quarterback Dale Fink, so they have to find a new signal caller. Can they find someone to replace him? And also, can they get some more production out the wide receivers? That's a big question mark. But what we'll learn is that Sacred Heart has enough talent on both sides of the line of scrimmage to cause some problems. At number 7, I have Wagner. Reasons for optimism. Quarterback Nick Dosher is a very talented dual threat passer, a guy that does a lot of damage on the ground, and wide receiver David Crawford is an explosive playmaker, 18 yards a catch. I also love the linebackers, very deep and talented group, guys that make a lot of tackles, plays downhill. Causes for concern, the offensive line, how quickly can they mesh, how quickly can they gel and be a productive unit, and the secondary has a huge question mark. A lot of talent was lost in the back half of that defense. But what we will learn is that Wagner, still with a tough schedule, can pose a threat in this conference. Next up is the Monmouth Hawks. Reasons for optimism, their defensive line is still very active, and they're going to make a lot of plays up front. And also like safety Jose Gums. This guy is going to be a tremendous playmaker for the Hawks. And offensively, I like the addition of tailback Kwabena Asante in the backfield is going to help bolster that running game. Causes for concern, I need for someone to step up at wide receiver and be a big player. I need for them to open up the passing game a little bit more. And the linebacking core is a big question. Can these guys step up and make plays behind the line of scrimmage? But what we will learn is that with the schedule they have this season, look for a lot of revenge victories for the Monmouth Hawks. Next up, I have Central Connecticut State. Reasons for optimism. Quarterback Gunnar Jesperson is going to always keep these guys in the game offensively with his legs and also with his accurate passing, 59%. He has to cut down on interceptions, though. And I also love their defensive line. They can really get pressure on the quarterback. Causes for concern is that defensive line. Can they stop the run? That's the biggest thing. 5.1 yards a carry they gave up last year, and the wide receiving core took a huge hit with graduation, so they're going to have to find some more playmakers out there on the flanks. But what we will learn is that due to the fact that they can rush the passer and Gunnar Jesperson can keep plays alive with his legs, Central Connecticut State will be in a lot of ball games. Next up is Robert Morris. Reasons for optimism. Quarterback Jeff Sinclair leads a very talented passing game. You look at what he's done last year, 22 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and tight end Shardre King is my best pro prospect in this conference, so he's very talented as well. And the offensive line is going to do just enough to keep this offense on pace. Causes for concern, they got depleted defensively. Their linebackers are gone. The defensive backs are gone. So they're going to have to do something to get these guys up to speed, and it's all going to fall on the shoulders on a shaky defensive line. But what we'll learn is that Robert Morris is very well coached, and they're going to find someone to run the ball, and they're going to find some defensive players just enough to stay competitive. At number 3, I have Duquesne. Reasons for optimism. Tailback Larry McCoy is outstanding, 1,300 yards last season, and quarterback Sean Patterson is the best QB in the NEC. Defensively, I look at Serge Coney. You see right there making big plays, always does that for the Dukes. causes for concern. I have some questions about the wide receiver core. They have to find someone to replace the 2 guys they lost. The defensive line has some questions, and linebacker has a huge hole, so how can they fix that? But what we'll learn is that Duquesne, with enough talent, still can make a push for the conference title. At number 2, I have the Albany Great Danes. Reasons for optimism. You know I love the running game trio of Smith, Romaine, and Masik, as all guys can run a rock, and the receivers are very talented and a very deep group. Defensively, you know I love the linebackers with John Morgan and also Dave Plungus. Both guys can really bring the lumber, and overall as a defense, they're very solid. Defensive end Eddie Delaney is one of my favorite players, very inspirational guy. Causes for concern. The offensive line has some leakage. They lose 3 starters. Can they replace those guys? And the quarterbacks are very inexperienced. How can that affect the team moving forward? But what we will learn is that it wouldn't surprise me if the Great Danes come out and win the conference outright. At number 1, I'm going with the Bryant Bulldogs. Reasons for optimism. Tailback Jordan Brown is a more explosive tailback in the country. 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns, and they're very solid at wide receiver. Both guys are average over 12 yards a catch. Jordan Harris at 18.7, and quarterback Mike Crosey is a very good player. 13 touchdowns, 57% of his passes completed, and you have to like the secondary. They don't give up a cold in the wintertime. Causes for concern. I look at the defensive line. Can they get pressure on the quarterback? Because that's going to be the biggest issue. But what we will learn is that overall, Bryant has enough talent offensively and a very good secondary to win this conference and get to their first playoff bid this season. For more FCS conference previews, visit footballgameplan.com/FCS or visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/footballgameplan. And listen to the Football Game Plan radio show, which airs Saturdays, 11 a.m. Eastern Time at blogtalkradio.com/footballgameplan.